Good morning, students. Mr. Young here with Chapter 6, Lesson 4. As you may well have guessed, with a title like The Final Years, the revolution is winding down with sweet, sweet victory. I can only imagine the burden lifted not only from Washington, but from all his soldiers as the war ended. There's nothing in my entire life that I've experienced quite like a homecoming after war, but I can only imagine how sweet it is to come home victorious. It's pretty nice. So, today we're talking about the war coming to an end. So let's start with Yorktown. In the last lesson we learned about all the battles in the South. Patriot forces basically chased British forces northward. When Washington saw British General Cornwallis and his forces headed north, he moved his force south to intercept, and Cornwallis and his force sort of backtracked a little bit and hunkered down in Yorktown, which turns out wasn't a great move because he cornered himself. Now, here's how things went down. Washington had been up north staging for an attack on New York to take it back from a significant British force with the help of a French force that had newly arrived. Washington was waiting for another French fleet to show up, but found out that this second French fleet was actually headed south towards Cornwallis. So Washington and his French allies secretly left New York and marched all the way to Yorktown. This force surrounded Yorktown on land, with the French fleet arriving and blockading it by sea. You can see here on the map. So we've got the French lines, the American lines, and that sweet, sweet French fleet right here. Basically, they laid siege to Yorktown, which might be described as, say, a land blockade. So no one or nothing was getting in or out of Yorktown, meaning no medical supplies for the British wounded, no food, things like that. Or, more importantly, reinforcements. No reinforcements to Yorktown. After the Patriots made some assaults on some key defenses, taking them, Cornwallis knew he was done and was forced to surrender. On October 19th, 1781. He took it pretty hard. You can watch this video for details. There's a whole lot of salt in there, kids. A whole lot of salt. Now, let's talk about the Treaty of Paris that ended the war. So, the British still held some major cities, such as New York, Savannah, and Charlestown. But the defeat at Yorktown signaled that this war with their colonies was just too much trouble. Representatives were sent to France, where a peace was brokered. Great Britain would recognize the United States as an independent nation and withdraw all troops. The United States needed to pay off all debts owed to British merchants, like for that tea they threw in the harbor, and return land that was taken from loyalists within the colonies. These weren't bad terms for the USA. It all seemed pretty reasonable. As such, Congress ratified the Treaty of Paris, and the final draft was signed on September 3rd, 1783. Now, there is a small section on here that's in the textbook that I didn't go in great detail in. Actually, didn't talk about it at all in this lesson. But between the victory at Yorktown and the actual peace treaty, Washington kind of didn't need his army anymore, but he didn't want to disband it quite yet. And they sat around and then got mad because Congress hadn't paid them yet. And they were talking about, like, using force against Congress, and Washington was able to talk them down, and Congress was finally able to pay them. So it might have been an issue, ended up becoming a non-issue. Alright, let's talk about this after-action report. In the military, we called what you sports fans might call the post-game analysis, we called it the after-action report, or the AAR for short. In this case, how the heck did a gaggle of colonists defeat one of the most powerful militaries in the world? For the simplest terms, I will put this AAR in outline form. The colonists had the home field advantage. They knew the land. The British had to send supplies over a massive supply route all the way across the ocean, and reinforcements over the whole ocean, and the colonists had wilderness fighting experience. They had done a lot of fighting in the French and Indian War and so on and so forth. The Americans, the colonists, they had help from various international leaders and French and Prussian officers like von Steuben and Marquis de Lafayette, guys like that. You also had France and Spain join the fight against Britain. That was pretty huge factor, perhaps the biggest factor. Also, it was a grassroots movement. It's hard to crush an ideal shared by a very large portion of the native population, and it was a people's movement. They were determined and they were motivated. Their home field advantage. They were cornered. We were fighting on our land. They were literally at times protecting their homes, and they'll fight harder than someone that's paid to fight. So after years of war, the United States earned her independence. It was a hard fight, a real underdog story with quite a surprise ending. No one thought that the colonists would win. But this is really just the beginning. Our course is called American Nation, and the American Nation was just born. So freedom was won, but what do you do with it? In Chapter 7, we learn about the first steps of the now independent United States of America. #America. Alright, for your assignment today, it's a question. You're going to be writing a paragraph. In today's lesson, we had an AAR listing some of the historically accepted reasons that the colonies were able to successfully rebel in independence. For example, home field advantage. They had help from foreigners, foreign aid, basically, and it was a grassroots movement. Your task today is to decide which one of these advantages was the most important to victory and tell me why in a paragraph or more. This assignment will be worth 10 points. I'll provide an example. It's shown right here. It's a Google Doc. You take a look. See a whole paragraph. Nice paragraph. More is better when you're writing essays. And that's it for today. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a good one, alright?